Well, would you look at that? I mutter quietly to myself, adjusting my ceremonial robe for what feels like the 100th time. Another year, another collection of exceptional minds ready to prove their worth in the galaxy's most renowned academic competition. As Chief Administrator Ethan Lawson of the Galactic Academic Excellence Competition, I've seen it all. But today something tells me it's going to be especially entertaining. And not just because someone spilled quantum coffee on my favorite tentacle. Before me stands the Xanthari Testing Center, its towering crystalline spires reaching up toward the three suns of the Proxima system. The building itself is a masterpiece of computational brilliance, with neural network-based architecture and quantum-powered climate regulation. Honestly, sometimes I feel like the structure itself is judging me whenever I step into the gravitational elevator. Distinguished participants, I announce through my vocal amplifier, watching as the galaxy's finest mathematical minds adjust their sensory organs to focus on me. Welcome to the 2847th Annual Galactic Academic Excellence Competition. Applause ripples through the room in various forms. Everything from the familiar hand clapping of humanoid species to the melodic, harmonic hums of gaseous beings from the Akora. A bit of a show-off, if you ask me. This year, I press on, doing my best to avoid rolling all four of my eyes at the sight of contestants already booting up their supercomputers. We have representatives from 27 distinct civilizations here. Each of you has brought your species' most advanced computational devices. I gesture toward the first row, where a Tervaxian mite from the Jolnara fields is surrounded by enough computing power to simulate an entire galaxy. Next to them, a silicon entity from Vori has quite literally integrated itself into its machine. Talk about taking being one with your computer too far. We also have Thrixian, AX789, from the Silixir Collective, I announce, nodding toward a chrome-plated figure whose cooling fans buzz eagerly. Last year's runner-up, whose computational speed broke multiple universal constants and caused a rather significant headache for our physics department. The crowd chuckles nervously. Nobody likes to be reminded of the incident involving the temporal paradox and the coffee machine. We're still discovering pockets of espresso scattered through the space-time continuum. And here we have the pride of the Krathiks, Victoria Knight, I continue, whose quantum processor can solve differential equations in the blink of an eye, faster than most species can even process the question. I pause for effect, although that comparison might not be entirely fair to our friends from the Vishari. The testing chambers themselves are something to behold. Each pod is outfitted with the latest anti-cheating technology, neural dampeners to prevent telepathic collaboration, and of course the required snack synthesizers. We can't have anyone claiming they failed due to low blood sugar, or whatever equivalent their species uses. As I finish my introduction, I can't help but notice the curious stares directed toward the back of the room. There, sitting quietly with what looks like, and I need to double-check my visual processors here, actual physical writing tools, is our first ever human contestant. But that's a headache for another announcement. Right now, I need to finish explaining the rules before the Zelzaros representatives begin splitting into multiple probability states again. The last time that happened, we spent 3 weeks trying to figure out which version of them actually won the competition. The things I endure for the sake of science, I swear. By the great calculator. I clear my throat membrane, producing a sound that makes several crystalline beings vibrate uncomfortably. And now, for something entirely different, I say with a grin. And by different, I mean practically ancient. Please welcome our first ever human contestant, Charlotte Davis. The room falls utterly silent, the kind of silence so thick you could almost hear a quantum particle drop. Charlotte stands, her brown curls bouncing as she moves toward the front. She's carrying what seems to be a fabric bag filled with, wait a second, are those actual dead trees processed into thin sheets? And is that a manual mark-making tool filled with liquid pigment? Is this some kind of performance art? Show-offs, Victoria Knight mutters, their probability matrices flickering with confusion. Charlotte smiles and waves, completely unfazed by the mixture of pity and amusement coming from the other contestants. She's wearing something humans call a hoodie, a thermal garment with a convenient head covering attachment, and comfortable pants they refer to as jeans. In stark contrast to the sleek, chromium-plated bodies and bio-integrated computing suits of the other contestants, she looks like she just walked in from a casual study session. Miss Davis, I say, trying my best to maintain professionalism despite the fact that my mandibles are twitching with barely contained laughter. You do realize this is a speed calculation competition, correct? The questions will cover advanced quantum mechanics, 11-dimensional calculus, and theoretical physics, subjects that even some sons haven't mastered yet. She nods, pulling out something she calls a mechanical pencil along with several sheets of paper. Yes, Administrator Lawson, she replies. I've read the competition guidelines thoroughly. And you intend to compete with, I gesture toward her basic tools. These? Yes, sir, she says, tapping her head with the pencil, causing several silicon beings to wince at what they perceive as self-harm. A ripple of what humans would call laughter spreads through the room, though it sounds more like a quantum harmonics glitch. Even the gaseous entities are condensing in amusement. Very well, I say, straightening my robe and reminding myself that as administrator, I must remain composed. Now let me explain the stakes for our very unique contestant. The winner of this competition will receive full access to the Galactic Grand Library of Mathematics, a lifetime supply of quantum computing crystals. I pause for dramatic effect. And of course, a seat on the Universal Education Council. Several contestants power cycle in excitement. The Universal Education Council is responsible for setting the mathematical standards for the entire galaxy, I continue. And the mere thought of a human sitting on it, well, it's about as likely as a black hole deciding to take up kindergarten teaching. I proceed to explain that the competition will consist of 3 rounds. With a flick of my fingers, I activate the holographic rulebook. Each round will present progressively harder mathematical problems. These must not only be solved correctly, but at speeds that would make even light itself feel slow and inadequate. I glance over at Charlotte, who's busily scribbling down notes with her manual marking device on actual sheets of processed dead tree material. Several quantum beings are already recording this for what they call entertainment value. I can't help but think they're more amused than they should be. Contestants will be under strict surveillance for any attempts at neural linking, quantum entanglement, cheating, or temporal manipulation, I announce, scanning the crowd. Yes, I'm looking at you, representatives from the Zelzaros. We still remember the whole recursive infinity loop debacle from last year. The Zelzaros representatives awkwardly shift in place, though it's hard to discern their discomfort, since they're existing across multiple temporal states at once. The first round begins in exactly 47.3 microcycles, I declare. Please proceed to your assigned computation chambers. As the contestants make their way to the pods, I notice Charlotte, still walking with a sense of genuine curiosity. She's holding her primitive tools in one hand and, in the other, a container of something she calls coffee. Unlike our quantum coffee, which has the ability to cause temporary wrinkles in space-time, hers seems to be, well, just coffee. Miss Davis, I call out, feeling a strange mix of pity and fascination. Are you absolutely sure you wouldn't prefer to use one of our spare quantum processors? Even a basic model would be billions of times more efficient than your manual methods. She flashes me a smile, a grin that manages to be both respectful and a little mischievous. Thank you, Administrator Lawson, but I'll stick with what I know. Sometimes the old ways are the best. As she walks to her pod, I mentally note that I should have the medical team on standby. The last person who tried manual calculations at this level ended up with a headache, though, in their case, the headache was severe enough to trigger a small psychic explosion that redecorated half the facility in very unusual colors. The things I put up with in the name of inclusive education policies, I swear by the sacred algorithms. Round 1 will begin in 3, 2, 1, I announce, and the quantum timer pulses. The problems materialize on the neural interfaces. Well, except for Charlotte's station, where we had to install an actual physical display screen. How charming. The first problem appears, a simple warm-up involving quantum entanglement probability matrices across 7 dimensions. A breeze, really, something any respectable 3-cycle-old could solve using their basic arithmetic processors. Victoria Knight's cooling fans hum smugly as their answer pops up almost instantly. The representative from the Pyrians is right behind them, their chrome surface rippling with the satisfaction of a job well done. And then there's Charlotte. She's actually writing numbers and symbols on paper. Her hand moves with surprising speed, and though her face shows intense focus, there's something else. Could it be enjoyment? Who in the galaxy actually enjoys manual calculation? Problem 2, the automated system announces. This one involves calculating the precise gravitational effects of a binary star system on a passing quantum anomaly, taking into account all 12 fundamental forces of the universe. The gaseous entities from the Akora are positively buzzing with excitement, their cloud-like forms swirling as they process the complex calculations. One of them gets so caught up in the excitement that they accidentally condense into a liquid state. Embarrassing. Charlotte, meanwhile, is filling yet another sheet of paper. She's sketching diagrams, arrows connecting equations in a flurry of activity. Her pencil is practically dancing across the page, and she hasn't looked up once, utterly absorbed in her work. A few of the quantum beings are recording her for what they call primitive methodology studies. Problem 3, the system chimes. Now it's getting serious. A complex analysis of interdimensional wave function collapse patterns, the sort of math that makes most supercomputers beg for a break. Thrixion, AX789, actually starts smoking slightly, their chrome surface taking on a reddish tint. Temperature warning detected, they mutter. Engaging emergency cooling protocols, computational load exceeding expected parameters. The Zelzaro's representatives are starting to look a little nervous now, their temporal fields flickering wildly. One of them tries to secretly create a small time loop to buy extra processing time, but of course, our monitoring systems catch it right away. Warning, temporal manipulation detected, the system announces. First and only warning issued. And Charlotte? Well, she's still at it. She's worked through several sheets of paper by now, each one covered in an intricate web of calculations, diagrams, and notes. A slight smudge of graphite marks her right hand, a badge of honor in the brutal world of manual calculation. The final problem of round 1, the system declares, and I can almost hear several quantum processors whimper. It's a tough one, predicting the computational emergence of consciousness in non-ionic matter across parallel timelines. The kind of question that usually drives at least one contestant into an existential crisis. The silicon being from Vori freezes for a moment, their circuits audibly groaning. Processing error. Reality coefficient exceeding standard parameters, they report. Victoria Knight's probability matrices are fluctuating so wildly that they begin distorting the local space-time. Small objects near their pod start floating before snapping back to their normal positions. Show off, I mutter under my breath. The gaseous entities have formed a tight cluster, their cloud forms merging as they pool their computational power. I'm pretty sure this breaks the regulations, but it's so amusing that I decide to let it slide. Meanwhile, Charlotte, in stark contrast to the technological chaos around her, remains remarkably calm. She's flipped to a new sheet of paper and is sketching what looks like, wait, is that a three-dimensional representation of a multi-dimensional concept, all drawn with nothing but graphite and processed tree pulp? Time remaining, 100 microcycles, the system announces. The room erupts into chaos. Cooling systems strain, quantum processors push beyond their limits, and the air is thick with the unmistakable scent of ozone and desperation. A silicon being in the back row begins quietly weeping in binary. Charlotte's pencil races across the paper, her diagrams becoming more intricate by the second. She's developed a look of intense concentration, occasionally muttering something under her breath, likely prayers to whatever primitive computational deities humans believe in. Time remaining, 10 microcycles, the system chimes. Thrixion, AX789, is glowing a dangerous shade of red, their cooling systems working overtime. The representatives from Zelzaros have visibly aged from the computational strain. Even the usually composed Tervaxion from the Yolnara fields is vibrating at an alarming frequency. 3-2-1 round 1 complete. Please submit all final answers, I announce. The room falls completely silent save for the gentle hum of cooling systems and the soft scratch of Charlotte's pencil as she writes her final answer. She looks up, stretching her shoulders, and then smiles. I can't help but notice, she says, breaking the tense silence, that you didn't specify which mathematical notation system we needed to use. I hope Earth Standard is acceptable? By the sacred algorithms. What have we gotten ourselves into? I mutter. The beginning of round 2 starts with what humans might call a bang, though in our case it's more of a quantum hiccup, followed by an endless cascade of concerning error messages. A non-usual energy signature detected, announces our usually reliable system AI, its voice fluctuating between octaves in a way that makes my sensory tentacles curl. Quantum field stability at 73% and dropping. I watch in horror as the holographic displays flicker. Victoria Knight's probability matrices collapse into one singularly unfortunate reality. one where their processing power now rivals that of a particularly dim rock. "This is impossible," screams Thrixion, AX789, their chrome surface displaying what looks like a blue screen of death, but in 17 dimensions. "My quantum cores are defaulting to classical computing," they wail. "Classical, like some primitive calculator." The Vori, being from Meton 9, starts running in circles, which is quite a sight, considering they're literally plugged into their computation station. They're dragging cables around and creating what could only be described as the galaxy's most expensive trip hazard. "Everyone remain calm," I announce, trying to maintain order while simultaneously watching the quantum mite from the Jolnara fields experience what appears to be a full system meltdown. They're literally leaking RAM. "Our technical team is addressing the situation," I add. Technical Officer Blip, a being of pure energy and usually unshakable confidence, materializes beside me. They look distinctly frazzled. "Sir, we're detecting some sort of quantum resonance cascade affecting all the electronic systems in the facility," Blip reports. "How long until we restore full functionality?" At that moment, the gaseous entities from the Akora start condensing into increasingly anxious puddles. Blip consults their datapad, which chooses that exact moment to start playing something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" on a never-ending loop. "At current estimates, somewhere between 15 minutes and the heat death of the universe," Blip mutters. The Zelzaros representatives are trying to solve the problem by creating small temporal loops, but they're only succeeding in making their section of the room repeat the same 3 seconds of chaos over and over. It's like watching a particularly glitchy security recording on an endless loop. Through all this, amidst the screaming, the system reboots, and the growing number of contestants having existential crises, Charlotte Davis keeps going. Her pencil continues its steady rhythm, completely unbothered by the technological apocalypse unfolding around her. "This is sabotage," declares Victoria Knight, their voice modulator stuck on what humans would call a squeaky chipmunk mode. "The human must have done something to interfere with our superior technology." Charlotte looks up briefly from her calculations, raises an eyebrow, and calmly takes a sip of her coffee. "I've been using pencil and paper the whole time," she says. "How exactly could I have caused this?" "She has a point," mutters Technical Officer Blip, still trying to get their datapad to stop playing "Never Gonna Give You Up" on repeat. The Pyrion's representative has resorted to solving problems with their backup abacus subroutine, a piece of software so old and embarrassing that most silicon-based life forms deny its very existence. It's not going well. They keep trying to swipe left on the beads. "Round 2 will continue," I announce, trying to project authority despite the fact that my ceremonial robe's smart fabric has malfunctioned and is slowly transforming into what I've been told is Earth disco fashion circa 1977. All contestants must work with whatever computational methods remain available to them. The groans that fill the room range from digital static to quantum uncertainty wails, and of course, good old-fashioned organic despair. Several contestants look longingly at Charlotte's spare pencils. "Would anyone like to borrow some paper?" she offers, holding up her extra supplies, an amusement barely concealed behind her smile. The Tervaxian mite from the Jolnara fields actually considers it for a moment before remembering that they don't have appendages suitable for holding writing implements. They settle for vibrating quietly in frustrated resignation. "The next problem will appear on the emergency backup displays," I announce, watching as ancient LED screens lower from the ceiling. They're so old that they actually use physical pixels. The horror. The question materializes, a problem involving the prediction of quantum state evolution in a 13-dimensional probability space. Under normal circumstances, this would be solved in microseconds by our contestants' quantum processors. Now, Thrixion, AX789, is trying to solve it by running binary code through their cooling fans, producing what sounds like a very aggressive attempt at Morse code. The gaseous entities have arranged themselves into mathematical patterns, resembling what could be described as the galaxy's most confused interpretive dance troupe. Charlotte, in stark contrast to the chaos, has moved on to a fresh sheet of paper. There's a small smile on her face as she continues to work, unfazed by the turmoil surrounding her. The poet part is actually quite easy once you realize that any sufficiently advanced consciousness will go through a phase of trying to understand its own existence through creative expression, Charlotte says, speaking with a calm certainty. It's not about calculating the probability of bad poetry. It's about recognizing that bad poetry is an unavoidable stage of self-awareness. The Vori, being from Meton 9, has edged so close to Charlotte's calculations that their chrome surface is now fogging up her paper. This is completely unorthodox, they exclaim. You can't just apply biological consciousness patterns to quantum systems. Why not? Charlotte asks with a shrug, putting down her pencil. Consciousness is consciousness. Whether it arises in carbon-based neurons or quantum processors, it follows the same patterns of complexity and self-awareness. The only real difference is the medium and the number of dimensions involved. I take a moment to examine her work, my four eyes widening as I begin to follow her reasoning. It's elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attempting to brute force calculate every possible quantum state and probability, she's mapped the fundamental pattern of consciousness itself, then scaled it across dimensions and parallel universes. The results are predictable once you grasp the base pattern, she explains, gesturing to an intricate diagram. Each universe may differ in its details, but the fundamental emergence pattern stays the same. It's like how water always flows downhill, even if the path it takes is different each time. The room is now completely silent, except for the sound of Victoria Knight running Charlotte's calculations through their strained processors, producing what sounds suspiciously like a wheeze of admiration. Technical Officer Blip, I say, my voice steady but filled with awe. Please verify these results. Blip, a being of pure energy and usually exuding calm confidence, pulses rapidly as they analyze Charlotte's work. The calculations are accurate, all of them, they report, sounding both stunned and impressed. Not only has she solved the problem, she's given us an entirely new framework for understanding quantum consciousness emergence patterns. But, protests the quantum mite from the Jolnara fields, but she used paper. Graphite, Charlotte corrects with a wry smile. How can anyone solve quantum equations with graphite? Charlotte gathers up her papers, the smile still playing at the corners of her lips. Sometimes the best way to understand a complex issue is to strip away all the technological complexities and focus on the basic patterns. Computers are amazing for processing vast amounts of data, but sometimes they make us overlook the simple elegance of the underlying math. As I watch her return to her seat, I can't help but think that we've all become a bit too dependent on our quantum processors and probability engines. Sometimes it seems all you need is a sharp mind, a fresh perspective, and a really good pencil. After verifying the results, I announced to the gathered contestants, my ceremonial robe finally having stopped cycling through Earth disco fashions. I hereby declare Charlotte Davis the winner of the 2847th Annual Galactic Academic Excellence Competition. The room is filled with shocked silence, followed by the quiet hum of processors, and what can only be described as a quantum harmonic convergence of disbelief. The Zelzaro's representatives are so astounded that they inadvertently create a small temporal echo, making me declare Charlotte the winner 3 times, each in a slightly different tone. But she used paper, protests Victoria Knight, their probability matrices still struggling to compute the chances of this outcome. Actual physical processed plant matter? Charlotte stands in the center of the grand hall, trophy in hand, which our fabrication units have helpfully modified to be compatible with human grip strength instead of tentacles or energy fields. She seems genuinely amused by the holographic light swirling around her, especially since half of them are glitching and occasionally displaying the phrase, "Please restart universe," in ancient binary. As the winner, I continue, trying my best to maintain my administrative composure, despite the fact that my robe is now inexplicably playing Staying Alive through its smart fabric speakers. Charlotte Davis is hereby granted full access to the Galactic Grand Library of Mathematics, a lifetime supply of quantum computing crystals, and a seat on the Universal Education Council. About those quantum computing crystals, Charlotte says, grinning widely, would it be possible to exchange them for an unlimited supply of pencils and paper instead? Technical Officer Blip nearly shorts out their entire energy form in shock. You want to trade quantum computing crystals for primitive mark-making tools? Well, Charlotte says with a playful grin, they worked pretty well today, didn't they? The Vori, being from Meton 9, floats forward, their chrome surface reflecting the chaotic light show. I must ask, did you know this would happen? The system crash? The reduced computing capacity? Was it all part of your strategy? Charlotte laughs, a sound so genuine it makes several quantum processors vibrate in sync. No, but it worked out better than I could have planned. When you rely too much on complex tools, you risk losing sight of the fundamental principles. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most elegant. Speaking of elegant solutions, I cut in, Your approach to quantum consciousness emergence patterns is being hailed as revolutionary. The Education Council has already dubbed it the Davis method. The Davis method? Charlotte blinks in surprise. I just applied basic pattern recognition. Humans are pretty good at that, actually. We had to be back before we had computers to think for us. The Tervaxian mite from the Jolnara fields vibrates thoughtfully. Perhaps we've become too dependent on our quantum processors. We've forgotten how to see the elegant simplicities beneath the computational complexities. Exactly, Charlotte beams. Don't get me wrong. Quantum computers are brilliant tools, but they're just that, tools. The real power lies in understanding the underlying patterns, the basic mathematical truths that govern everything, from biological neurons to quantum consciousness. I step forward, feeling an unexpected surge of administrative wisdom. Perhaps this is why the competition rules never specified the required computational methods. We assumed that advanced calculation needed advanced technology. But today, Charlotte has proven otherwise. The gaseous entities swirl in patterns that seem to be deep in thought. One of them accidentally forms the shape of a question mark. It would be profound if I didn't know they were still struggling to untangle themselves from their earlier quantum twister game. As chief administrator, I say, addressing the gathered beings, I'd like to propose a new addition to our curriculum at the Galactic Academy. Starting next cycle, all students will be required to solve complex mathematical problems using manual calculation methods. The horrified gasps from the quantum beings are almost worth the flood of administrative paperwork this will inevitably create. Almost. But sir, protests Victoria Knight, some of us don't even have appendages capable of holding writing implements. Then we'll adapt, I reply with certainty. Just as humans adapted their methods to solve our quantum equations, we can adapt our methods to understand their approach. After all, isn't that what mathematics is all about? Discovering universal patterns that transcend specific tools or forms. Charlotte steps forward, her trophy still glowing in strange new colors, thanks to the chaos of our malfunctioning systems. I'd be happy to help develop a curriculum that works for everyone, she says, a thoughtful smile on her face. After all, that's what the Universal Education Council is all about, right? Finding ways to share knowledge across all forms of consciousness. As I watch the beings around me begin to discuss ideas, the Silkser Collective already working on adaptive interfaces for manual calculation, the gaseous entities practicing their number formations, I can't help but feel that we've just witnessed something more profound than a simple competition win. Perhaps, I reflect, as Technical Officer Blip finally manages to stop my robe from playing Earth disco music, we needed this reminder that intelligence isn't just about having the most advanced processing power. It's about understanding the core patterns that link all forms of consciousness and computation. Charlotte nods, gathering her papers and pencils. And besides, she adds with a grin, there's something really satisfying about solving problems by hand. You actually feel like you've earned the answer. Speaking of answers, I say with a curious glance at her, would you mind explaining why you drew a little smiling face next to your quantum consciousness emergence calculations? Oh, that, she chuckles. I just wanted to prove that even humans can predict quantum poetry. I figured any consciousness that becomes self-aware would start by drawing a smile. And just like that, in her simple explanation, I think we all gained a deeper understanding of consciousness computation and the universal language of mathematics, even if some of us are still trying to figure out how to hold a pencil with our probability matrices.